Welcome to Global Studies 9.
Chapter 13, Section 1, Charlemagne and the Germanic Kingdoms. So we left off a few videos ago. We saw the fall of Rome come in the 5th century, and many historians cite this time from the 5th century all the way up to about the 14th, 15th century, this almost millennium, to be the so-called Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. Now, throughout these Middle Ages, we see various smaller empires emerge, whether it be under Clovis or Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Empire. But overall, it's a period where there is no major centralized power, and we see this era of knights and noble families and feudalism, which we'll get into more detail later on. Now, following the fall of the Roman Empire, we begin to see a change in regards to how people live in Europe. We first of all see a major change in trade. People are no longer trading items that are from thousands of miles away because there are no longer safe trade routes. We also see the fall of cities. People are beginning to abandon cities and move back into rural territories where you have noble families at the top that own all the land, the knights that protect them, and then basically everyone else, which are live in a feudal society where they're basically slaves. Now, one of the reasons why we see such a steep drop in regards to quality of life and learning and new inventions and new ideas and philosophy and whatnot is just simply the fact that the people in charge now cannot read or write. In an illiterate society, it's very often limited in regards to how much that society can excel itself in regards to invention and critical thinking. Furthermore, it made it difficult that people couldn't communicate easily. So if you remember back in the Roman Empire times, so many people were able to speak Latin. As a result, people were able to communicate for trade, communicate ideas, help learn from each other. Whereas now with all these scattered different rural pockets of area, people are no longer able to communicate through a common language. These communities tend to be ruled by oral traditions and nothing was written down. Furthermore, these were traditionally royalty-run societies where lords were often given power based on birthright and not based on meritocracy. And you had these warriors who fought for these lords, which kept them power. Now, the first type of unification we see take place in Europe during the Middle Ages is by Clovis. So as you can see in the map here, it would be considered modern-day Western Europe, parts of France and Germany. And these areas were united by Clovis, who helped unite various tribes, the Frankish tribes, in that area into one kingdom. What's very important about Clovis's Frankish kingdom is that he used the church as a tool to help control people and as a tool to communicate his ideas with other people that were within his territory. This is also a change in the sense that the church is now getting a more and more important role in society. Following the death of Clovis, his territory was split into 4 pieces, as you can see in the map here, and his sons fought over these various territories, and it was never united again. So the Clovis Empire was very short-lived. In 590, Gregory the I became Pope, and this was a real game changer. He really broadened the role of the church by having them involved in things like repairing infrastructure, creating armies, creating jobs in politics. So the church is becoming truly this all-powerful institution that was very, very involved in politics. It was around this time we also see a massive increase in the church building monasteries. So monasteries look a little something like this. They're these quaint little buildings where you have these monks basically practice being Christian all day. They wake up, they read the Bible. They often write the Bible as well, because don't forget the printing press has not been invented yet, so people need to handwrite new versions of the Bible. And they live very pious lifestyles, very simple lifestyles where it's just a very quiet life and they're reading a Bible all day and they're serving their life to the church and God. Now, perhaps the most famous monk and famous nun is Benedict and Scholastica, who are both twins. And in the writings Benedict left behind, it gave us an idea of how monastic life was very quiet, how it was just about studying and making new copies of the Bible. And Scholastica is also considered the first nun, worked side by side with her brother, Benedict. Now, Christianity continues to play a major role in the Middle Ages, as we see here from the Frankish Empire and Charles the Hammer, who helps defeat Muslims around what would be considered modern-day Spain, and there he becomes a Christian hero. Defeating the Umayyad Caliphate, he's remembered as a great war hero, and after his death, he passed on his power to Pepin the Short, his son. The first Carolingian king of the Franks was Pepin the Short, and he's often considered less son and less father of two men. It's kind of unfortunate because Pepin as leader did help expand the Carolingian Empire to a certain degree, and he also helped legitimize the church's role in the Frankish Empire through something known as the donation of Pepin, where he gives certain rights to the church in regards to political and territorial autonomy in regards to newly conquered territory. So again, going back to this quote, less son and less father, what they're referring to is his father, Charles Martel the Hammer, and Charlemagne, who we'll talk about in a second. So Pepin's son, Charlemagne, helped extend the Frankish Empire, and under him they are able to increase many people into Christianity, and they were able to expand the territory quite a bit. His empire during his reign was in fact bigger than the Byzantine Empire, and here's a quick look at it. You can see it'd be almost like all of modern day Germany and France. And the interesting fact about him, number one, is when he was crowned king, the person to crown him was the Pope. So this was symbolic in the sense that it was showing that the Pope and the church had more power than the king because they were the ones giving him the crown. Another interesting sort of fun point about him is his father is called Pepin the Short, and he's he's just regular Charlemagne. And part of the story goes is that Pepin the Short was not short at all. I mean, he was at least 6 foot, which is much bigger than the average man back in the day. I mean, even today to a certain degree. Charlemagne was about 6'7", 6'8", just a giant back then, even a giant today. But this is back then when people were, averaging 5'4", 5'5". So he was almost 2 feet taller than the average person. So the joke goes that, Pepin is called Pepin the Short, but as we know from biology, one can only be so short when they are creating a child that's almost 7 foot tall. So, interesting little history trivia there. So this map gives you an idea of just how big Charlemagne's empire was when he gains power, and in fact, by the time he dies, you can see that he's actually been able to take parts of what would be northern Italy and even parts of what would be modern-day Eastern Europe, which were tributary states. So they weren't technically part of the empire, but they had to pay tribute to Charlemagne's empire. Although the Carolingian Empire slowly grew right under the Pepin the Short, Charles Martel, Charlemagne, it actually comes to a quick stop in the 9th century when, following Charlemagne, his son Louis the Pious takes over, who was not a great leader and not good at keeping authority over the empire, and the empire broke up into many pieces, and Europe, at least that part of Europe, what would be modern-day Germany and France, returns back to a form of feudalism, where you have lords, knights, peasants, and again, we go into that deeper into when we look at the feudalism section. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made of. Have a nice day. Goodbye.